Welcome back to the eighth installation of us keeping tabs of various NFL backfields and the average rush, snap, and target shares compared to the current week. We begin once again with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This week, Najee Harris was awesome for a third straight week. He went 19 for 114 on the ground, averaging 6.0 per carry and no touchdown. Jalen Warren was also very efficient. He went 9 for 46, averaging 5.1 per carry with no touchdown. Overall, the running game was very impressive. Looking through the air, Najee had 4 targets in this one. He went 3 for 17, averaging 5.7 per catch. Jalen Warren was really efficient as well. On 3 targets, he went 2 for 13, averaging 6.5 per catch. When we take a look at the season averages, throughout the first 7 weeks, Najee had averaged 57% of the snaps, and this one he played 59%, so not too much of a difference there, but a slight uptick. On the season, although this is a little bit affected by injury, he did miss some games. Jalen Warren's played 29% of the snaps, and this one he played 39%. He did play over 50% just barely this past week, so he did see a decrease in snap count and percentage. When we take a look at the average rush share for Najee Harris throughout the first 7 weeks, he had 49.94%, and this one he went all the way up to 61.29%. So a huge uptick in total rush share. When we take a look at Jalen Warren on the season, he's had 8.14%, and this one had 29.03. So an uptick there, but definitely much in the favor of Najee Harris, despite the fact that they were both very efficient. When we take a look at the average target share, Najee's had 10.72%, and this one saw 14.81, so an uptick there as well. And Jalen Warren on the seasons had 6.78, and in this one had 11.11. And so we saw heavy utilization of the Pittsburgh Steelers running backs, both on the ground and through the air in this one. But Najee Harris is definitely the back to own still, but it is encouraging after a sluggish beginning to the season for Jalen Warren, partially due to injury for sure, that he has been much more efficient recently, as well as Najee Harris the past 3 weeks. I will say, though, their schedule gets pretty difficult, so as to whether they'll continue this efficiency or not will remain to be seen. I am a little bit pessimistic here. And so unless we see anything majorly different in the upcoming weeks, I think that Najee Harris is going to be a little bit less efficient, but still the back to own. And the same for Jalen Warren. I think he's going to be a little bit less efficient due to tougher matchups, but he's definitely going to be a reasonable flex play if he continues to get this utilization. Taking a look at the Vikings backfield, this was the Aaron Jones show. We really saw nothing from Ty Chandler. At least he wasn't utilized in terms of rushing the ball or as a receiver. And so Aaron Jones went 19 for 58 on the ground, 3.1 per carry. The Rams defense was very tough on Thursday night. And so while he wasn't efficient on the ground, through the air, he was awesome, even though he was limited to 2 targets. He went 2 for 37, averaging 18.5 per catch. I really think they should have featured him a little bit more in the passing game. I think that would have helped them move the chains. But so it was a little bit of a bum week considering what we've seen in terms of the ceiling for Aaron Jones on a week-to-week basis. But the usage in terms of snap share was awesome. On the season, he averages 58% of the snaps played. And this one, he saw 92%, the highest he's had yet this season. Ty Chandler has had 33% on the season. On this one, only saw 4% of the total snaps, didn't register a touch. On the season, Aaron Jones has averaged 51.01% of the rush share, and this one saw 86.36. Ty Chandler has averaged 27.58, none this week. Aaron Jones, throughout the first 7 weeks, has averaged 15.32% of the target share. He did see a decrease in target share in this one for sure, with only 8.7%. But in terms of his utilization compared to Ty Chandler, that is very encouraging. And so I think that Aaron Jones, in really important games in the sense of games in which the Vikings aren't going to have a comfortable lead, is going to see his snap, rush, and target shares increase, at least comparatively to Ty Chandler. And so I think that makes Aaron Jones a very safe plug-and-play RB2 with RB1 upside. But as far as Ty Chandler is concerned, I still think that he is really just a handcuff at this point. And so I think that we can trust Aaron Jones in the future. He's generally going to be much more efficient on the ground than we saw in this game. And so I think that we can expect this offense to continue to be really fantasy friendly. And as long as Aaron Jones is healthy, he is an auto start every single week. Taking a look at the Bengals backfield, Chase Brown was the lead once again on the ground in terms of touches, although his 12 only went for 32 rushing yards, averaging 2.7 per carry, but he did score a touchdown. Zach Moss didn't fare much better. He actually fared worse. He had 5 for 11, averaging 2.2 per carry with no touchdown. Through the air, though, Zach Moss was much better. On 4 targets, he had 4 for 28, averaging 7.0 per catch with no touchdown. Chase Brown on 4 targets was thoroughly inefficient, so he had 2 for 2, averaging 1.0 per catch with no receiving touchdown either. And so we continue to see that they are curbing each other's upside. On the season, Zach Moss has played 63% of the snaps. He started out as essentially a featured back, but he's seen that dwindle downwards. In this one, he only played 52% of the snaps, so slightly more than Chase Brown, despite the fact that their utilization was much different. Chase Brown has averaged 38% of the snaps played throughout the first 7 weeks, and this one played 50%, so an uptick there from where he was, but still not quite as much as Zach Moss in terms of just snap share. But when we take a look at the rush share throughout the first 7 weeks, Zach Moss had 44.62%, and this one only saw 25%. Chase Brown on the season has averaged 40.35, and this one saw 60. And so despite the difference in snap share being slightly in Zach Moss's favor, the utilization on the ground was much more in Chase Brown's favor. Taking a look at the average target shares throughout the first 7 weeks, Zach Moss has had 9.91%, and this one saw 11.11. Not much has changed there. A slight uptick, though. Chase Brown has had 8.66%, and this one saw 11.11% as well. And so what can we expect? Well, the way it's trending, despite the fact that Chase Brown was thoroughly inefficient on the ground, he was still more efficient than Zach Moss. And Zach Moss continues to be much more efficient than Chase Brown through the air. And so I think they're going to continue to curb each other's upside. But I think due to Chase Brown receiving a lot more total volume, that I do think he's the safer play. I think he's trending towards being a general RB3 with RB2 upside if he scores, to just maybe being a decent flex. And as far as Zach Moss is concerned, I think he's a desperation flex with a pretty low ceiling nowadays. We'll have to keep tabs on this backfield, but really, Chase Brown is the only one I would, in general, feel comfortable starting on a week-to-week basis. Looking at the Jaguars backfield, in the absence of Travis Etienne, in this particular game, it was the Tank Bigsby show. On the ground, he went 18 for 78, 4.3 per carry, not the best, but could definitely be worse. No touchdown for him. Trevor Lawrence stole the rushing touchdown this week. D'Ernest Johnson was barely utilized at all on the ground. On 1 attempt, he had 3 yards, 3.0 per carry, no touchdown. Through the air, Tank Bigsby saw an impressive amount of targets, considering what we've generally seen from him. Although he was pretty inefficient, he definitely isn't an asset per se in the receiving game. In this one, he went 2 for 8, 4.0 per catch, no touchdown. D'Ernest Johnson, however, has remained thoroughly efficient through the air in Etienne's absence. On 2 targets, he had 1 for 20, no touchdown for him. When we take a look at the average snap shares throughout the first 7 weeks, Bigsby's had 30%, and this one saw 67% in Travis Etienne's absence. On the season, Etienne's played 45%, once again injured in this one. D'Ernest Johnson seen 25% of the snaps throughout the first 7 weeks, and this one saw 33%, but it was definitely Bigsby's week for utilization. When you take a look at the average rush shares throughout the first 7 weeks, Bigsby's had 35.05%, and this one saw 78.26. That's right around featured back territory for sure. Etienne's had 37.1% on the season. D'Ernest Johnson's only had 14.47% on the season, and this one only saw 4.34. Taking a look at the target shares, like I said, Bigsby is barely utilized at all. On the season, he's only had a 1.13% target share. And this one did see 10% though, although I doubt his usage remains the same or absolutely and definitely isn't going to grow given his efficiency. ETN on the season has had 9.81%, and so that kind of matches the 10% that we saw from Bigsby in this one. And on the season, Dernish Johnson's had 5.24%, but in this one saw 6.67, so an uptick there for sure. So what can we conclude? Well, I think that in game scripts where the Jaguars aren't really trailing, at least by multiple scores, in ETN's absence, Tank Bigsby is a fine RB2 with RB1 upside. Dernish Johnson, in that kind of a game script, is basically unplayable. In games in which ETN misses, but it's probably going to be a very unfavorable game script, that Bigsby's desperation flex, and the same with Dernish Johnson. And so I think that when ETN returns, he's going to be an RB3 with upside, and the same for Tank Bigsby. I'd feel safer about ETN's floor on a week-to-week basis, but Bigsby's been so much better on the ground, despite the fact ETN's been fine usually, that they really just curb each other's upside, and it's very disappointing if you drafted Travis Etienne, given he did happen to finish as the RB3 due to insane touchdown efficiency and total volume. But to be fair, at least the floor is still pretty good with Etienne when he plays, because he is getting a very solid amount of the receiving work and they're losing generally. And so Dernish Johnson is basically going to return to being a complete non-factor here. Taking a look at the Packers backfield, Josh Jacobs received a ton of volume on the ground. He went 25 for 127, averaging 5.1 per carry with 2 tutties. And so we're finally starting to see the touchdowns come for him. Awesome. Chris Brooks, though, I hadn't really seen his name this year, so I really don't have anything for him. If he plays again and gets touches and a snap share next week, I'll add him, though. He went 4 for 16 on the ground. That's 4.0 per carry. Definitely not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Emmanuel Wilson, though, 4 for 5, 1.3 per carry and no touchdown. That is pretty bad. So hopefully he can return to being efficient. I think his efficiency the past 2 weeks has been down for sure. Through the air, he was also horribly inefficient, but as was Jacobs. Josh Jacobs on 2 targets went 1 for -2, and Wilson on 2 targets went 2 for -2. So basically, they were both non-factors. Chris Brooks was technically better. On 1 target, he went 1 for 1, so that was somehow the most efficient day through the air for the Packers running backs. Getting back to being serious, though, on the season, Jacobs has 65% of the snaps played, and this one saw 64%, so a slight downtick there, but really nothing to worry about. It's basically the same. Emmanuel Wilson, though, on the season has averaged 29% of the snaps played. On this one, only played 17%. So that is a certain downtick in at his expense to the gain of Chris Brooks. So we'll have to keep tabs on that. If we see utilization next week, I'll add him to this, and then we'll be able to track that. Looking at the rush share, though, despite the fact that Jacobs did receive 1% less of a snap share, his rush share went up. On the season, he has 55.50%. In this one saw 64.1. Wilson on the season has had 23.78, and this one only saw 10.26, so a sharp downtick there as well. When we look at the target share, Jacobs has had 7.8% on the season, and this one saw 7.41, so basically the same utilization. Wilson on the season has had 4.6%, and this one saw 7.41, so an uptick for him. And so I think Jacobs remains the high-end RB2, low-end RB1 with massive boom weeks here and there. And Wilson has gone from what was a middling to desperation flex play to probably just being unstartable altogether. And so we'll have to keep tabs as to the utilization of Chris Brooks. We'll see about the total usage as well as the efficiency. He may start eating into Emmanuel Wilson's role. And so it would be interesting if he was the running back to own in the absence of Josh Jacobs should he get injured. And so we'll definitely keep tabs on this backfield. Taking a look at the Rams backfield, this was a tough matchup against Minnesota. Their run defense is very good. He went 23 for 97, averaging 4.2 per carry and no touchdown with a long of 17. His yards per carry was definitely hurt, in my opinion, by them trying to run the clock out at the end of the game. So I do think he was, in general, a little bit more efficient, especially in the first half. Blake Corum, though, did see an uptick in total usage compared to what we've seen from week to week. He's trending upwards, but not that much per se at the expense of Kyron. He did go 4 for 9, though, 2.3 per carry, no touchdown for him either. Through the air, though, it was nice for Blake Corum to see him utilized at least once. On one target, he went 1 for 9, so very good there. Kyron Williams, though, was thoroughly inefficient. He did receive 7 targets. He went 5 for 19, but he did score a touchdown, and so his touchdown streak continues. He is as good of a bet to get a touchdown every week as really anybody. And so we do like that for him. He has a nose for the end zone. And in general, he's going to be more efficient. Like I said, it was a very tough matchup. The Vikings defense is no joke, on the ground particularly. Taking a look at the utilization throughout the season, Kyron Williams played 86% of the snaps throughout the first 7 weeks, and this one saw 89%, so an uptick there. Blake Corum on the season averages 7%, and this one saw 11%, so an uptick for him. On the season, Kyron Williams averages 76.23% of the rush share, and this one that did dip down to 71.88%. And so while it did dip, he still had 23 carries, so they just ran the ball more than they generally do on average. I wouldn't put too much stock into that. Kyron is still a featured back. But Blake Corum on the season has 11.45% of the rush share, and this one saw 12.5, so an uptick for him as well. And on the season, Kyron Williams has 8.49% of the target share, and this one, that went all the way up to 20.59. I don't expect that to remain the same every week, but that is awesome to see if you're an owner. And as far as Blake Corum's concerned, on the season, he has 0.37% of the target share, and this one saw 1 target, so 2.94%. So really, there isn't too much that's changed for this backfield. Kyron Williams is still the lead back, and he's really one of the most featured backs in the NFL. Blake Corum, though, is definitely the backup now. There's no doubt about it. He is being utilized, even if sparingly, every single week. He is 1 injury away. And so as far as their value, Kyron Williams is still an elite RB1. He is as good of a bet to score a touchdown as anybody. He has an insanely high floor and a massive ceiling every single week. And Blake Corum really is a very good bench stash, especially if you're a Kyron Williams owner. Because should Kyron Williams go down, Blake Corum stands to gain a ton of usage and has looked pretty good with his opportunities, even if he wasn't that efficient in this one in what was a tough matchup. And so I really don't think anything's changed, but we are going to continue to watch this backfield in the event something does. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. I love doing these videos where we keep tabs of various NFL backfields and look at the average rush, snap, and target shares compared to what we see in the current week. And so if you want to see more content like this and want me to continue keeping track of these trends, just like and subscribe. Thanks. Moving on to the Giants backfield. I was absolutely wrong. It appears as though it is the Tyrone Tracy show. He is dominant on the ground in terms of the total percentage of the rushes. He saw 20 for 145 in this one, 7.3 per carry and a touchdown. He did leave the game with a concussion, and so I think he's going to end up missing this next game. But based on how he's performed, I wouldn't worry at all when he does return about his usage. Singletary only saw 2 carries, 11 total yards. He was, relatively efficient, 5.5 per carry for sure, but thoroughly concerning. Eric Gray didn't receive a touch on the ground either. And so through the air, Eric Gray went 1 for 3 on 1 target, so really nothing there. Tyrone Tracy was pretty inefficient through the air as well. On 3 targets, he went 2 for 5. Singletary fared a little bit better there. On 3 targets, he went 2 for 12. And so through the air, a relatively inefficient day for the running backs of the Giants. When we take a look at the season snap shares, Singletary has 76% on the season. That is flipped, though. In this one, he did see 39% of the snaps played, so definitely a downtick from what we saw the first couple weeks of the season. But since he's returned, this was an uptick from last week, but the usage is still massively in Tracy's favor. On the season, Tracy's played 15% of the snaps. He saw 57% in this one. He did leave early with a concussion, though, so that probably would have been a little bit higher. And Eric Gray's seen 22% of the snaps, and in this one only saw 4. When you take a look at the usage on the ground, for the season, Singletary has 69.49%, and this one saw 8%. On the season, Tracy's had 14.68%, and this one saw 80%. And so the point to keep track of there is that his rush share is definitely approaching featured territory. It's right on par, at least this week it was, with that of Kyron Williams in general. So that is good to see. Eric Gray's gone from 11.97% to failing to register a rush in this game. When we take a look at the target shares throughout the first 7 weeks, Singletary's had 9.01%, and this one saw it dip to 8.11. Not a massive downtick, but still. Tracy's seen 1.96% on the season, and this one saw 8.11. Very encouraging, even though he wasn't really very efficient. And Eric Gray's seen 0.91% on the season, and this one saw 1 target, so it ended up being 2.7%. And so what can we conclude here? Well, it's absolutely the Tyrone Tracy show. He is a decent bet to miss this next game with a concussion, but with how awesome he's been on the ground, I find it pretty hard to believe that when he does return, he's not going to have the lion's share of the rush attempts. Through the air, I do expect him to probably split with Singletary, with Eric Gray mixed in here and there. Eric Gray's a distant third. If you're in a deeper league, he's rosterable, a dynasty league probably. As far as Singletary is concerned, if Tracy misses this next week, he's definitely a plug-and-play flex, but as soon as Tracy returns, I think he's just a solid bench stash in the event of another Tracy injury. And when Tracy does return, I think that he's an RB2 with definite elite RB1 upside. So we'll have to keep tabs on this backfield in terms of if Tracy misses this game and Singletary is able to have a very good day in terms of his efficiency. If it starts to trend a little bit more towards a timeshare, or if Tracy really has the lion's share of the touches wrapped up, we'll keep tabs on that. I do expect Tracy to retain his role as a general bell cow when he does return, but in the event I'm wrong, we'll definitely still keep tabs. Looking at the Dolphins backfield, A-Chain was very efficient, 10 for 97. The return of Tua, there is a direct correlation to that for sure. 9.7 per carry with no touchdown, long of 47 though. He was explosive. Raheem Mostert went 9 for 19, 2.1 per carry with 2 touchdowns. He was utilized more so towards the goal line, and so he was relatively inefficient, but that is part of it. Jalen Wright, though, continues to be the most efficient back, even though it is a limited sample size by week, at least since the return of Mostert. He went 2 for 18, 9.0 per carry. And by the way, Mike McDaniel did have an interview where he stated that there would be an uptick in usage for Jalen Wright going forward. And the reliability guy on Twitter, I'm forgetting what the name is, Coach Speak Index, I believe, he said that there is, I think, an 85 to 87% chance of what he's saying being reliable in terms of, in general, when he talks about somebody's usage. So that is encouraging. And so I do think we could see a surge in usage for Jalen Wright, given how awesome he's been on a per-touch basis. Through the air, though, Jalen Wright wasn't involved. Once again, he's not really much of a receiver in this offense. Raheem Mostert went 1 for 11 on 2 targets. Pretty good. Devon A-Chain continues to be heavily utilized through the air. On 8 targets, he went 6 for 50, 8.3 per reception with a touchdown. Awesome. Taking a look at the usage throughout the first 7 weeks, A-Chain's had 56% of the snaps played, and this one saw 58, so an uptick there. Mostert's seen 22% on the season, and this one saw 46, so an uptick there. And Jalen Wright on the season has seen 23%. He's gone down to 5. I do expect that to potentially start creeping up at the expense of Mostert, though. On the ground, A-Chain's had 40.8%, and this one saw 40, so basically right on par. Mostert's seen 15.99%, and this one saw 36. And on the season, Jalen Wright's had 16.47%, and this one saw 8, so cut in half. Through the air, though, it's been the A-Chain show. He's had 14.29% on the season, and this one saw 21.05% of the target share. Mostert's basically been a non-factor. He's had 2.21% on the season. He's had 5.26% in this one, and Wright's just not been targeted. And so what can we expect from these running backs? I think the A-Chain in general, given his heavy utilization through the air and pretty good, solid, efficient at least, utilization on the ground, is going to be a mid to elite RB1 on a per week basis, depending on the matchup. The return of Tua is awesome for him. Raheem Mostert, I think, is going to be a decent flex play for the time being. He has touchdown upside, but he's really hasn't been that efficient. And Jalen Wright has been by far and away the most efficient back out of all of them. I expect his usage to go up at the expense of Mostert. And so I do think that if Jalen Wright receives an uptick in usage at the expense of Mostert, they're both unstartable, and one would need an injury to the other to be of use for us in fantasy. But once again, Devon A-Chain is a plug-and-play mid to elite RB1 on a per-week basis. Taking a look at the Raiders' backfield, this was definitely a forgettable day for all of them. Madison went 14 for 15, 1.1 per carry with no touchdown. Amir Abdullah went 1 for 2, 2.0 per carry. Zamir White on 2 rush attempts lost 2 yards, so negative 0.5 per carry with no touchdown for him either. That is just about the worst rushing performance of any team that I can remember. I'm sure that is probably one of the worst, but I could be wrong. Through the air, Amir Abdullah on 2 targets went 1 for 9. Pretty efficient for him. Madison was a little bit less efficient, but on 5 targets, he went 5 for 29, 5.8 per catch and no touchdown. And so really, it was the Madison show. Amir Abdullah appears to have established himself as the RB2 in terms of the snap share. Getting to that, on the season, Zamir White has 29%. He was healthy in this one and only saw 3% of the snaps played. And so that is, he's basically a non-factor, the RB3 on his own team. Massive fantasy disappointment for some people. Madison on the season has 51% of the snaps played, and this one saw 66. He's trending towards bell cow usage. Amir Abdullah on the season has 19%, and this one saw 29. And so he appears to have directly replaced Zamir White. Taking a look at the average rush shares on the season, Zamir White has 34.78%, and this one saw 9.52. Sharp downtick there. On the season, Madison has 42.18%, and this one saw 66.67%. Right on par with the very high-end timeshare running backs, trending towards featured RB utilization. On the season, Amir Abdullah has 7.54%, and this one saw 4.76. A little bit of a downtick there for him. On the season, Zamir White has a 3.48% target share, and this one wasn't utilized. On the season, Madison has an 8.71% target share, and this one saw 18.52. And so we've seen a couple weeks this year where he's received a ton of volume in the receiving game. And Amir Abdullah on the season has 4.65%, and this one saw 7.41. So an uptick there as well. And so as far as their rest of season outlook is concerned, I think that Madison is a fine flex RB3 type with RB2 upside. Zamir White's an afterthought that's probably droppable, maybe if you have deep benches. And Amir Abdullah appears to be the direct handcuff to Madison. But like I say every week, I would probably avoid this backfield unless you have to start one of them. But if you're going to start any of these running backs, Madison is by far and away trending towards being the bell cow in this backfield. Taking a look at the Buccaneers backfield, Buck Irving was pretty efficient, 9 for 44, 4.9 per carry, no touchdown. White was pretty efficient as well, pretty much the same. 6 for 29, 4.8 per carry, no touchdown for him. Sean Tucker was basically an afterthought in this one, 2 for 3, 1.5 per carry. Through the air, though, Buck Irving and Rachaad White continued to be awesome. Irving on 7 targets went 7 for 40, 5.7 per catch, no touchdown. Not incredible, but very good utilization. Rachaad White is very good through the air. On 6 targets, he went 5 for 38, 7.6 per catch with a touchdown. And so Irving and White are definitely the 1-2 punch with a distant third for Sean Tucker. When you take a look at the seasonal usage, Irving has seen 41% of the snaps throughout the first 7 weeks, and this one saw 42%. White's seen 56%. In this one, he saw 56 as well. And Sean Tucker on the season has seen 11%, and then this one saw 10. And so basically, the season totals ended up matching basically what we saw in this game. When I take a look at the rush share throughout the first 7 weeks, Irving's had 37.33%, and this one saw 40.91, so a slight uptick for him. White on the season has had 34.68%, and this one that went down to 27.27%, so a relatively decent downtick for him. On the season, Tucker's had 9.56%, and this one saw 9.09, a negligible difference for him there. Through the air, Bucky Irving on the season has had 6.31%, saw 15.22% in this game. That is awesome to see that it more than doubled. Rachaad White on the season has had 10.89%, and this one saw 13.04%. I was saying in the rankings videos that they were much more likely to increase the utilization of the running backs in the passing game in the absence of Evans and Godwin. And so it was good to see that for them. On the season, Sean Tucker's had 2.13%, and this one saw 2.17, so basically the same for him. And so what can we conclude? Well, I really think that Irving is maybe a high-end RB3, low-end RB2 type with high-end RB2, low-end RB1 upside if he's very efficient, receives heavy utilization, and scores. Rachaad White is probably more so a mid RB2 with RB1 upside if he's heavily utilized in the passing game and does score himself. Sean Tucker is basically an afterthought, but if there is an injury to either Irving or White, he is definitely going to be probably right around what we would see from Bucky Irving, in my opinion. And so we'll definitely have to keep tabs on this backfield. It's pretty rare that you see the snap shares basically match what we've seen throughout the first 7 weeks in the current week. And so I definitely think that the Buccaneers are going to continue to heavily feature Irving and White as long as Mike Evans is out at least. And so I think that in general, with Godwin being out for the rest of the year, that we are going to see a permanent uptick in total volume for the running backs in the passing game. I just think that with the return of Evans, it's probably not going to be quite this drastic. And now we look at the Denver Broncos, and this one, this backfield might be the most unpredictable of all of them. Who even knows anymore? Jaleel McLaughlin, and this one saw 8 attempts on the ground. He went for 47 yards, 5.9 per carry. Very efficient. No touchdown for him. Williams was incredibly inefficient. On 17 carries, he went for 44 yards, averaging 2.6 per carry with no touchdown. Very surprising given that they were playing the Panthers. I would have expected his efficiency to basically mirror McLaughlin's. Estime was basically an afterthought, 1 for 4. It is good to see, though, from his fantasy standpoint, that even with that fumble this past week, he was still played in this game. Through the air, Javonte Williams was very inefficient as well, so a terrible game efficiency-wise for him. On 5 targets, he went 4 for 8, 2.0 per catch, no touchdown. Jaleel McLaughlin, though, on his only target, went 1 for 9 and a touchdown. So very efficient game overall for McLaughlin, and he ends up getting the touchdown this week. Looking at the usage, on the season, McLaughlin plays 30% of the snaps, and this one saw 32%. On the season, Williams averages 60%, and this one saw 58%. On the season, Estimates played 3%, and this one saw 7%. So McLaughlin and Williams basically traded off, with Estime receiving some of what was theoretically Tyler Beatty's role. And when we take a look at the rush shares, throughout the first 7 weeks, McLaughlin's had 22.16%, and this one saw an uptick to 25%, so that's good for him. Javonte on the season has 41.42%, and this one saw 53.13%, so an uptick for him, even though he wasn't very efficient. And Estime on the season has had 4.78%, and in this one saw 3.13%. Slight downtick there, but not too much of a difference. Taking a look at the average target shares throughout the first 7 weeks, McLaughlin's had 6.46%, and this one only saw 2.63, so a downtick there. Javante's had 14.9%, and this one saw 13.16. Slight downtick there as well, but not too crazy. And Estime's had 0.3% of the target share, and this one wasn't targeted. And so in general, I think that Javonte is, despite his inefficient outing against the Panthers this week, is the running back to play. I think that he's a fine RB3 with RB2-ish, maybe, or RB1 upside if he's really efficient in scores. He's getting heavy utilization in the passing game. McLaughlin continues to be a spiky type of player where some games he's really efficient and he does get the touchdown, and then other games he's basically a non-factor. Estime, I think next year is probably going to have value, or if Williams goes down, I think he'll be a direct replacement. But for now, he's really barely rosterable if you're in seasonal. In Dynasty, he's a stash for sure. But yeah, I think Javonte continues to be probably an RB3. McLaughlin, a desperation flex, and Estime needs an injury to Javonte to really have any value. And finally, we have the Dallas backfield. Rico Dowdle was sick, and so that's why I didn't play in this one. I expect him to return to being a featured back to, at the very worst, being the much preferred back in a timeshare. And so we saw Zeke go 10 for 34, pretty inefficient, 3.4 per carry, but he did get a touchdown. Dalvin Cook, I had heard that he looked great in practice. Well, he didn't look good in the game. 6 for 12, 2.0 per carry, and no touchdown. Through the air, Dalvin Cook, though, did go 1 for 10 on one target. Zeke went 1 for 4 on one as well. Really a day to forget. Zeke was bailed out by a touchdown. Taking a look at the seasonal usage, though, on the season, Rico Dowdle has 42% of the snaps played. Didn't play in this one. Zeke has 34%, and so in his absence, he played 45%. Dalvin Cook, fresh to the roster, so he didn't have any usage throughout the first 7 weeks, and this one saw 27%. Rico Dowdle had 42.85% of the average rush share. Didn't play in this one. Zeke on the season has had 29.25%, and this one saw 52.63. And Dalvin Cook in this one had 31.58. On the season, Rico Dowdle has 8.02% of the target share. Zeke has 4%, and this one he saw 2.7. And Dalvin Cook had 2.7 as well. And so in the absence of Rico Dowdle, Zeke was bailed out by a touchdown, otherwise was not even a flex player. Same with Dalvin Cook. And so I think that when Rico Dowdle returns, Zeke and Dalvin Cook are bottom of the barrel running backs that I guess you can they're fine being rostered, I guess, in deeper leagues or dynasty leagues if you really need a running back with the potential to receive some volume, but they're just pretty cooked in my opinion. Rico Dowdle is the much preferred option. I think that he's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 with upside to be a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 in general if he scores. And yeah, I really don't see this changing anytime soon because Elliott and Cook were thoroughly inefficient in this one. And so that concludes the 8th installation of keeping tabs of various NFL backfields and the average snap, rush, and target shares compared to what we saw in the previous week. Which of these backfields interests you the most? In my opinion, the Jaguars interest me the most. It's going to be interesting to see when ETN returns. I think he's probably back this week, based on what Peterson said, that I'm not really sure what the usage is going to look like. I expect him to retain his role in the receiving game, but as far as on the ground, it will be interesting to see if Bigsby has performed well enough to eat into his rush share when he's healthy. And so I want to keep tabs on that one. But yeah, if you like what you've seen and heard in this video, feel free to like and subscribe. I love doing these backfield breakdowns. And so if you want to see this continue, just like and subscribe. Thanks.